97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow at 6 a.m. with Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. Today, Andrew DiCecco from 97.3 ESPN.com. It's brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to iloveLyleBack.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. And, of course, Andrew DiCecco here on a Tuesday. We'll get his thoughts on the hires, what's next, and I want to get some draft conversation going. I know Andrew is chomping at the bit to talk a little draft. I want to get his opinion on a couple of things, and he joins us now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andrew, what's up, man?
Hey, Mike. How you doing, man?
All is well, and let's first start and get your initial reaction to the coordinators that are now in here. What do you know about Nick Sirianni's staff, and kind of give us an overview on what you think of Jonathan Gannon as the defensive coordinator. We'll start with him first.
Yeah, well, Jonathan Gannon, obviously he's a young coordinator. He was a defensive backs coach for 3 seasons with the Colts. Before that, he had experience with the Vikings and the Titans. And a lot of people may not realize this, but he also has a background in scouting, which I found rather notable as far as a player evaluation moving forward. But look, he's a young coordinator who had a lot of success with the Colts developing young talent, such as young corner like Rock Ya-Sin, a young safety like Kari Willis, and Julian Blackman, who was a good find in the NFL draft, who a lot of people don't talk about. You hear about Antoine Winfield and Jeremy Chin and those type of guys, but Julian Blackman performed just as well as those guys. And Xavier Rhodes. Xavier Rhodes is a player that he had experience with the Vikings, who got him to play this peak performance with the Vikings, and he also kind of revived his career with the Colts, and he's going to be a free agent here moving in this offseason, so that's something to watch. But I think you're going to see a lot of man press from his style, and I think that when you look at what they have in Darius Slay, he's going to be more aggressive. He's going to be able to take more chances on the foot and more plays on the football. This might not appease many Eagles fans, but Jalen Mills fits the prototype of the type of corner that he likes in his system. That physical, a little bit longer, more quick than they are fast type of corners, and of course with the safety help over the top. But and they're going to be a lot of blitzing and a lot of attack style. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does there. I do find it a little bit peculiar knowing that he went with 2 young coordinators. I probably would have opted for a veteran either on the offensive coordinator spot or the defensive coordinator spot.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up a point that I don't know that it's been talked about a lot, is once you get guys from one team, you look at their free agents. They have some very interesting Indianapolis free agents. The problem is I don't know how big of a player Philadelphia can be in free agency, but they have a couple guys that are free that would fit the bill and the needs.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're looking at a guy like Zach Pascal, they're probably going to put a second-round tender on him, I would assume, which is going to be well out of the Eagles' range, and they're not going to let him go regardless. And even if they did, the Eagles wouldn't have the means to be able to acquire somebody like that. I do know Nick Sirianni is a big Zach Pascal fan. He did wonders for his development over the last 2 seasons, over 600 yards receiving over the past 2 years. But Xavier Rhodes, to me, strikes me as somebody that if the money's right, you could probably land him with a veteran free agent deal. If he had one of his better seasons under Gannon's tutelage, so I do think that there's a good match there. If he's willing to get on board, I think that he would be a reasonable player to think that he can come into the fold there.
Real quick, there are a couple interesting free agents secondary. You mentioned Rhodes. Malik Hooker, the safety's had some injury problems, but, working in the secondary, that might be a guy that wants to come play for Gannon as well. T.Y. Hilton is also a veteran wide receiver, a little older, but you wonder when you look at that. And another guy to keep an eye on, I think with Sirianni, Andrew, is Trey Burton, who they talked about 2 tight ends. I don't know if you can keep Ertz, but maybe you could bring Burton who's a really good receiving tight end.
Yeah, and that's another thing we're talking about Nick Sirianni and his offense. There's going to be 2 tight end sets, and Zach Ertz probably won't be here next year. That also puts in, Kyle Pitts in the first-round conversation perhaps in the NFL draft. But that, Trey Burton is a guy who's obviously familiar with the Eagles organization. I think he'd be a good low-cost option to fit as that second tight end there. He's also another thing to look for in their offense. He likes getting these quick twitch receivers in space, so I think that could play well into Jalen Reagor. And he likes the pass catching running backs. So those are a couple. Knowing those 2 nuggets there, I mean, you can kind of pair. There's going to be some free agents out there that fit those qualities as well as in the draft. So I mean, there's definitely a certain identity to his offense to a certain mold of players that he looks for.
Are you surprised they didn't go with any veterans in the defensive coordinator position or the offensive coordinator position? I figured, look, he's age 39. Maybe at least on one side of the ball you get a Marvin Lewis or a Jim Caldwell. Not specifically those guys, but someone that fits that mold.
Yeah, I was more kind of shocked that there wasn't a veteran defensive mind, knowing that Sirianni's never called plays before, but I figured he'd want to take ownership of the offense. So I figured this would be a good opportunity for him to call plays. So I didn't necessarily think that he would surround himself with a veteran offensive coach, although, Jim Caldwell or even Pep Hamilton, who could be in play for the quarterback's coach, depending on what happens with the Tennessee Titans, he interviewed there. But, I mean, on the defensive side, I understand the ideology of bringing in a young coach that kind of has an upward trajectory there. But I mean, there's a lot of veteran defensive coaches that you can kind of plug in there that they can just oversee that defense, much like Jim Schwartz did, and let him and Sirianni can kind of just focus on the offense. He's going to give Gannon free reign, I assume, to make those decisions on the defensive side of the ball. But it would be a little bit less daunting for a veteran coach there.
Yeah, that's a lot of good points there. Sirianni on the offensive side, young guy. Gannon on the defensive side, young guy. They did bring in an offensive coordinator as well, and I'm interested to get what about Shane Steichen, who, if on the surface I said, hey, he was the coordinator for the Chargers. Justin Herbert had one of the best rookie seasons ever, but it seems that a lot of Chargers fans were like, hey, don't let the door hit you on the way out, buddy. What do you know about Steichen? And, they ran the ball at a top 10 rate on first down. I think Eagle fans might like that. He seems like a guy who commits to establishing the run. And I wonder if he even ends up calling plays as another element to all this. But what do we know about Shane Steichen?
This struck me as a relatively bland signing, Mike. He only had one full season as offensive coordinator. He called the plays with the Chargers, but I have a feeling that Sirianni's going to have his handprints all over that. I think that Steichen's going to be very involved in the game plans, but looking to what he did with Justin Herbert, I think that's a little bit overblown. I think that should be more credited to Pep Hamilton, the quarterback's coach, versus Steichen. He had one full season there, but and the Chargers did rank ninth in the NFL in total yards and 16 passing yards. But then you look at many of the head-scratching calls. That was one of the most frustrating offenses to watch last year, given the amount of talent that they had. And they were 21st in the red zone scoring and 30th in rushing yards per play. And also their 24 points per game was relatively pedestrian. I believe they're only 19th or 20th in the NFL in that. So, I thought there were other candidates that probably would have been a better fit. There's a lot of question marks here with Steichen. There's not a lot known about Steichen yet. But, just watching their offense last season, there's definitely reason for skepticism, I would say.
I feel something that might be going unnoticed in all of these coaching changes is actually keeping Stoutland. What do you think this means to the organization and some of the players that have been in this locker room?
Well, I'll tell you what. Jeff Stoutland is one of the most revered coaches on the Eagles staff. He's integral to what they do. He has a lot of responsibility for a position coach. He's also the run game coordinator. He's overseen the development of several young offensive linemen that were kind of thrown into the fire last season, such as Jordan Mailata, Nate Erbig. He's just been such a steady, consistent presence on the Eagles coaching staff. And looking at, Steichen and his background, Mike, you talked about how they like to run the football. They like to run the football a lot when he was with the Chargers. And, kind of combining that with the run game coordinator in Stoutland, I think that the Eagles could have an entirely new identity on offense. So Jeff Stoutland, it was so crucial to retain him that I don't know that many people understand how important that was on the surface.
Yeah, Andrew DiCecco is with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Press Taylor is out. They're bringing in a new pass game coordinator as well. And obviously, Andrew, this whole staff, I would imagine, is being put together to try to fix Carson Wentz. Do you read it like that, or do you think there will be a legitimate quarterback battle when we get to camp?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you read the tea leaves, this is definitely – these hires are made solely with Carson Wentz in mind. But if you're going to just hand someone the quarterback spot one way or the other, whether it be Carson or Jalen Hurts, I think that's malpractice on Sirianni's part or the Eagles' part, because Carson Wentz hasn't done anything last season to warrant being handed a starting position. I think that if you do keep Jalen Hurts, which I'm not 100% sure that they do, I think there should be it's fair to have a quarterback competition. Obviously, you're going to give a grade Carson Wentz a little bit of a curve given the investment in him, but I think just for from the locker room perspective and the players that were there last season, I think they're going to want to see it play out, have the two guys compete. But with the hires that have been made, it certainly seems like they're catering towards Carson Wentz.
Does anybody feel that Wentz is kind of like that? Wentz maybe said, "Hey, I want out of here. I want Peterson gone," and never thinking the Eagles were actually fired Doug Peterson, and it's like, oh my God, they called my bluff and fired this guy. Now, you know what I'm saying? Like, does anybody feel like maybe that's why he hasn't said a word yet? He hasn't said anything about the new coach. Hey, welcome to the new coach. Pumped up to work with you. Nothing. Like, do you think he was like, "Hey, I'm not happy. I want out. Me and Doug can't get along. They fired Doug," and he's like, "Oh my God, they fired Doug. I didn't want to be here. You didn't have to do that."
Well, I do find Carson's silence to be a little bit perplexing, Mike, to be honest with you. Honestly, I mean, it's going to be critique either way, what he says, be it good or bad, body language, this, that, anything they could read into. I mean, it's going to be kind of dissected. That's just the nature of the quarterback position. But I will say, being the leader, the face of the franchise, you owe it to not only the fan base that have stuck by you, but you also owe it to your teammates and the organization to step forward and make a comment here or there. Just say, "Let's go," or something similar, like looking forward to, welcome coach, looking forward to.
Hold on. You think it's enough? You think it's enough if he just tweets or Instagram, like if he just says that, or does he have to come out and say something?
I think it's been too long. I think it's at this point it's been too long that a "let's go" with a picture might be read into a little bit heavily. But if he did this weeks ago, I think it would be maybe a different conversation.
Yeah, just anything that kind of show. Looking, excited to, get behind you, Coach Sirianni, looking forward to the 2021 season, anything like that. The fact that you hear radio silence on his end leaves a lot of things up to interpretation, whether that's right or wrong. That's just the nature of it. You haven't heard a guy speak since, I believe it was, week 13 or 14? I mean, it's kind of, and you're hearing all these different stories. Seems like every day there's a new story coming out about Carson Wentz. I'm asked about it every single day. I don't like to make assumptions because you just don't know. He hasn't said a word, but I think that's fair to say that it's I don't know that Carson expected Doug to be fired, but here we are, and this is the situation, and we still haven't heard anything from him. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And, I just feel his agent and everyone surrounding him is just telling him, hey, let's be quiet. Let's figure out the situation. But just to kind of backpack off what Gil was saying, to throw it the other way, we were told that he needed time to think about things. Well, what if he did think about things? We were informed they had a conversation, him and Sirianni. What if he's like, you know what? I'm not sold, and I still want to be traded. What do you do if you're the Eagles then?
And that's been my answer, Hunter. My answer when folks ask me questions about Carson Wentz, I said, we still don't know if Carson even wants to be in Philadelphia. We don't know if he's fully bought into Sirianni's vision. We don't know what the conversation was. We don't know if Sirianni told him, look, this is the situation. There's going to be a quarterback competition in the offseason. We don't know what the conversation or the dialogue was between the two guys. He may not like the vision. He could have been brought in with the sense of, okay, you're going to deal with this guy to the Colts. We don't know anything because we're just kind of left to kind of surmise what kind of conversations could have taken place. But I definitely think that there's also that aspect where, you know, you see all the different hires and everything, and it certainly seems like the Ducks are lined up for Carson Wentz to return and, you know, get him a strong support team to kind of rebound. But we don't know that because, like we said, it's been radio silence on his end. We don't know what Sirianni told him, and you know, who knows if he's part of his vision.
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. Dave Phipp also leaving the organization. Deuce Staley leaving the organization. So what kind of loss is that to the coaching staff, especially Deuce? That whole story, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you, where he had so much support from players to get a job, didn't get it, and you wonder, you know, you haven't seen a lot of players coming out in support of this particular, not that people are bashing or saying, you know, but it's got to be awkward that some of these players were lobbying for a guy that was on the former staff, and now he's not here.
Yeah, and if you remember back to when we spoke last week, I said it would have been better for both parties for Deuce to move on and turn the page on his career. I feel like it wasn't going to happen. I mean, it was very evident. He survived different regimes. He did everything that you possibly could have done. It was evident that the writing was on the wall that it wasn't going to happen here in Philadelphia for whatever reason. So I'm glad to see Deuce get another opportunity with the Lions. I think he's going to be a head coach in this league. You don't get all those different players to advocate for you for no reason. There's something there. He's a leader of men. I think that he would be a better head coach than he would a position coach. And I think in the right situation, he'll get a head coaching job and he's going to thrive. I don't think it would have happened in Philadelphia, so it made sense for both parties to kind of just mutually part ways. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I stand with that.
Obviously, moving up in the ranks as a coach is how it all works, but how valuable is it that Sirianni was a wide receiver coach, a quarterback coach, then an offensive coordinator? I'm just looking at the versatility and maybe what he can bring to impact this team, but maybe I'm reaching, considering a lot of these coaches, you know, they do move up in positions.
No, I don't necessarily think that you're reaching, Hunter. I think that his versatile coaching background was probably, you know, it looked great on the resume, and I'm sure that kind of helped bring him, you know, make him a more prominent candidate to the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles struggle in the areas in which he coached and kind of oversaw some resurgences and a lot of player development. Looking at what he did with the Chargers with Tyrell Williams and Keenan Allen, and looking what he did with the Colts when he didn't have T.Y. Hilton available. He got the most out of a Zach Pascal, out of a Marcus Johnson, out of a Chester Rogers, and guys that weren't necessarily household names. And oversaw quarterback play. So he's somebody that can give his 2 cents and stick his head in a lot of these different rooms and be able to have that presence and be able to speak on a lot of those things. So just having that versatility made him stand out, in my opinion, from a lot of other candidates.
All right, Andrew, we have a couple more minutes left. I want to focus on the draft and get first your opinion on, now that Sirianni's the coach, does that change your thought on number 6 from where it might have been if Doug was the coach?
Not necessarily, Mike, because I do think that those guys are both offensive-minded guys. Now, what kind of will be the determining factor, in my opinion, what happens what the Miami Dolphins choose to do at 3 and what the Bengals choose to do at 5. Both of those teams strike me as teams that might be in heavy pursuit of a Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
So, you know, if that
okay,
happens,
let me stop you right there real quick. If they're there at 6, do you feel that that's the definitive way they have to go? If one of those 2 guys is there at 6, is that the definitive way where you would go?
That's not necessarily the definitive way, but I think that's ultimately what they would do should they fall that way.
Oh, here we go. Go ahead.
Like I was saying, if those 2 teams that I mentioned go wide receiver, I don't believe that they should reach for a Michael Waddell at number 6. I do think that a player like Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle, would fall to the Eagles at number 6. And I think that, yes, they have Andre Dillard, they have Lane Johnson, you have Jordan Mailata. The Eagles have proven, recent history will tell you that you can never have too much depth at offensive tackle. And Penei Sewell is a franchise caliber left tackle. When you have a chance to get somebody like that at the 6th spot, you take that player.
All right, so at number 6, if all the guys that you would hope to be there are there, what is the position of impact that makes the most sense to you?
To me, I would address the offensive line because to me,
Wow.
the game is won on the offensive line and the defensive line. It doesn't matter how good your skill players are. If your trenches, if you have leaky, faulty players in the trenches, there, it doesn't matter what you have there. Also, corner would work. The Eagles have put Band-Aids on the second cornerback spot for years, and I think it's time to address that. If you have a chance to get a guy like a Patrick Surtain, a J.C. Horn, a Caleb Farley, you do that. You make your team better that way, and the identity may change. You might have a little bit of opinion from Jonathan Gannon there, who does like those more physical, longer corners, and Patrick Surtain certainly fits that mold.
Patrick Surtain. I mean, if it's me, Andrew, I think at number 6. Look, the offensive line to me. I agree with you. They need to start getting younger and get upgrades, but I got to take my chance that those guys come back and give me another healthy season. Like Lane Johnson's 30, Brooks is 31. I'm hoping those guys could play 2-3 more years, right?
I mean, you would hope so, but history shows that you can't necessarily bank on that. When they banked on that in the past, look at wide receiver and Deshaun Jackson. In the past couple of seasons, you bank on getting that guy through, at least 13 to 16 games, 13 out of the 16 games.
Yeah.
That necessarily hasn't worked. And all of a sudden you're left, your plan that you went into the off season with, it pretty much just kind of fell apart. And I think that would be malpractice for them to kind of bank on those guys staying healthy if you have a chance to add the top tack on the draft.
This is a good wide receiver class, probably almost maybe as deep as last year, if not deeper.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You can get another one of those guys in the second round, in the third round. And look, if Nick Sirianni is as good of a wide receiver developer as he's being pegged, it shouldn't be a problem. He should be able to get the most out of these guys, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside included.
All right. Couple, because linebacker, I don't know if they're going to take a guy at 6, Parsons maybe, but 37, I feel like there's a couple guys, Nick Bolton, Baron Browning, Chez Surratt. Surratt's interesting. He played quarterback at Carolina, and then they moved him to linebacker. The dude was a stud. Dylan Moses, people forget about him at Alabama, but he's a guy who, because of the injury, he might be there at 37. There's some good linebackers. So in round 2, maybe finally they address that spot.
I think that would be the way to go. And if you look at what the Colts have done over the past couple of seasons, getting Darius Leonard in the second round, I believe it was in 2019, they selected Bobby Okereke in the third round, and who is one of the most underrated linebackers in football, by the way. So they've put a higher price tag on the linebacker spots than the Eagles have. So I think that kind of ideology that's kind of went by the wayside with the Eagles in the previous regime may all of a sudden be in play in the second round.
What about Davion Taylor, though? Just dating back to last year, I'm not saying that they shouldn't look at other options, of course, but, you did draft him in the third round, and we were told that he was a project.
True.
Should we be expecting him to go out there and play next year?
Well, I mean, when he was drafted, Hunter, to be honest, I had a fifth-round grade on him, and I honestly thought that he was 2 or 3 years away from being ready to contribute to an NFL defense. But the Eagles have made this error over the past few seasons in assuming that certain players are going to take that leap. They made that assumption with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. You make that mistake again with Davion Taylor, and you don't really address it until the 5th or 6th round this year to add some depth. That could be a problem.
All right, couple wide receivers, maybe in round 3. Your thoughts? Amari Rodgers, all right? De'Ami Brown, UNC, Elijah Moore, and who's another guy I like? Maybe Wallace from Oklahoma State.
My answer would be D, none. I would go with the wide receiver. I would go with Dwayne Eskridge, the wide receiver from Western Michigan. He's going to be a guy that, to answer your question, that I think will be in play in the late second round. He's currently at the Senior Bowl right now, getting off to a good start. You talk about players that are good in open space, much like a Jalen Reagor. That's Eskridge right there, and he also doubles as a punt returner and has these different. And he can get deep on a team, and his route running is very advanced for a player at this stage of the pre-draft process. So I think there's a lot to like there. You mentioned Amari Rodgers, is why I say that, and Tylan Wallace. So in similar size, similar type of skill set. I would go with the Dwayne Eskridge personally.
Yeah, Rodgers is, I mean, that dude's super productive. Clemson, it's kind of, those guys to me, so Rodgers, especially Moore, feel like slot guys, and I don't know what the heck they're going to do with Rieger. Is he going to be a slot guy? Is he going to be an outside guy? You got Fulgham. Can Sirianni get more out of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? What does he see in Fulgham? I think the wide receiver position is going to be so intriguing. Dillard versus Mailata, very intriguing. What happens at center if Kelsey retires? That's intriguing. They got to get younger on the edges, so I guess edge rusher comes into play somewhere. So much to discuss. We'll do it throughout this all season leading into the draft, and Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, will be a part of it here on Football at 4 and the Sports Bash. Andrew, that was good. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man. Take care.
All right, now you know his blood's going. He's got it. He's ready to go for draft talk. I gave him 4 receivers. He said D, none of the above.
That was great execution out of him. It's exciting stuff, though. I'm starting to get a little juice stuff for that.
This morning I woke up, it was all drafted up.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but you kind of pushed me into that direction of really starting to process, okay, what's next? I'm overblown right now with all this emotions. You got the Flyers that look piss poor. You got Ben Simmons that's pissing me off. You got JT Realmuto signing. So there's all these emotions coming from all these different directions. You're throwing draft on me, too. I got to find a way to get that in the mix.
Football at 4, it's brought to you by Dr. Lyle and Back. Everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelyle.back.com, 856-MAKEOVER. Proud sponsor of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. It's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can check out tomorrow morning